Hello there, I am Matthew Munoz, author, artist, and commentator, and these are my offhand remarks on Kamen Rider Build. Something like that. Yes, the three-hand rule, three directions, I don't know what that's called. Who cares about science, right, guys? Anyway, so Kamen Rider Build is a Japanese children's television show aimed at probably 8-year-olds. It's made by a company called Toei. I talked about Toku Timber the other day. It's made by a company called Toei. And I think it airs on TV Asahi, if you even know what that is. Bandai is also involved. Bandai's a toy company. They popularly make the Power Rangers toys. And you know, I actually don't know what else Bandai makes in America. But Bandai is, or was, a contributing partner to the Sunrise show that I've been talking about on Offhand Remarks, off and on, G Gundam. So Bandai's into like the robot-y toys and stuff. So I don't know what else they make, but that's immaterial for right now. So I just enjoyed the final episode of Kamen Rider Build today. It's 49 episodes. There's a movie that came out, actually 2 movies with Build in it. One where Build is a co-star, and one that is, every Kamen Rider series for a while has gotten a feature film to go along with it. So, in a few months, when the Blu-ray is released in Japan, some industrious youth will rip it and send it over to subbers who will sub it for free for people like me to enjoy. There's a whole thing you can go on about. I could go on about the Tokusatsu fan subbing community if I wanted to, and it would be an interesting conversation, I think. But that's not what I'm here to do. I'm here to talk about Build. I just want to say that I've been watching Kamen Rider for over 5 years, almost 10 years actually, and I've really enjoyed it. It's been a trip. There's been lots of fun things. I mentioned that it's aimed at like 8-year-old children probably. That's more or less accurate. I've read that apparently college students get to enjoy it too, because believe it or not, in college you have a little more free time. I don't know the way Japanese college is structured versus American or Western colleges. I'll stick with American because that's what I'm familiar with. As little familiar with, I'm unfamiliar with it, but I'm way more familiar with American colleges than I am with any colleges outside of the United States. So there we go. Anyway, it's for kids, and a lot of it is selling toys. So there's monsters in it that the heroes fight, and the heroes fight by transforming via a belt typically, and the belt has different things you can put into it, especially since Kamen Rider Double back in 2010, I believe it was. It's all about being able to stick things in the belt, and Double had 2 USB sticks that he would stick into the belt. It's a little more complicated than that, but I won't go into it. The next guy, O's, had 3 medals that he would stick into the belt and then scan with a scanning device. And then there was the next guy, Forze. I guess I'm just going to do this brief intro to Kamen Rider right now before I get back to Build. Then Forze was like an astronaut suit, and he had this cosmic power through these astro switches that he would plug into about 4 of them at a time, and he would transform with those and then activate different powers with them. There was the main combination was rocket drill, which he would use a rocket on his arm would make him fly around, and a drill on his leg he would use to defeat enemies. So you can hear how ridiculous all this is, but it makes for fun, like visually entertaining fights and items to display, and toys that kids want to buy and that sometimes adults want to buy too. After Forze was Wizard, and he was a magic using Kamen Rider, and he had magical rings. And with these magical rings, he could basically, every ring had a different spell tied to it, and he would activate the magic by putting on different rings and then scanning it on his belt, because that's how it is. Kamen Rider has belts because in the 70s, the original Kamen Rider had a belt, and most of all the older riders in the 70s and 80s had belts that were the source of their power, although I hear one of them, Amazon, had like an arm bracelet thing, but his belt was still kind of important. At least it was prominent in his character design. Anyway, moving on. And then there's, I'm sticking with these 10. So I did Double, O's, Forze, then Wizard, and then the 6th one after Wizard is called Gaim. And we don't talk about Gaim here. And then the next one was Drive, which had a policeman who mercilessly hunted down and murdered artificial intelligence beings who did nothing wrong for the most, or even those who had done nothing wrong. Some of them were criminals who were committing terrible crimes, and instead of incarcerating them, he murdered all of them with the help of his fellow police officers. So that was interesting, especially because I think Ferguson had just been like a really big thing after Michael Brown was shot. Which anyway, yeah, Drive was complicated for me. But I'll go back to Gaim. Okay, Gaim had fruit. It was a fruit mixed with a padlock, and the belt had a knife on it, and you stick the fruit padlock into the belt, and then you swing the knife down on a pivot thingy, and it cuts the fruit open, and you access the power of the fruit by that. Yeah. Anyway, that's not why I dislike it. I dislike it because it's terrible. That's why. So Drive was Kamen Rider police brutality, which wasn't great. There were a couple shining moments where he like fought against that, and then the show ended with him trying to wipe out the race, the minority race, of course. Anyway, then after Drive was something I liked a lot. It was Ghost, and he had this belt that looked like a little ghost thingy, and he would stick eyeballs in it, and the eyeballs were icons. Like the Japanese know English, so there was a pun there, or many Japanese do, I believe. Anyway, so there was anyway, he was pulling on power of historical figures, and these historical icons would give him power. So he would transform into a Kamen Rider, and then he would get the power of Thomas Edison, and he had electrical powers. The power of Isaac Newton, and then he had gravitational powers. The power of Musashi. Can't remember his other name. Then he had 2 swords, and he was a better swordsman with that power. Anyway, Minamoto Musashi. Anyway, doesn't matter. And then after Ghost, there was, hold on, who came after Ghost? So it was the Fruit God, then the Ghost. Hold on, it was Drive, then Ghost, and then X-Aid. So X-Aid was a doctor, and the doctors were fighting these viruses, and these viruses were monsters. So it kind of seems similar to the artificial intelligence race and Drive, but instead of mercilessly murdering all of them, X-Aid, the hero, did the noble thing and tried to reform as many of them as he could, and it was a really beautiful thing. This guy is not getting over? Why not? Anyway, it was a really beautiful thing. X-Aid is probably the best Kamen Rider I've seen, and that brings us to the thing that was subsequent to X-Aid, which stands for Extreme Aid, which was Kamen Rider Build. And Kamen Rider Build it was set in basically an alternate universe from the other Kamen Riders, which is interesting because they don't. Anyway, it doesn't matter. That's getting too complicated into comic book timeline type stuff. All the different universes and multiverses. But basically, Kamen Rider Build was this scientist wakes up with amnesia, and he's a brilliant physicist, but he doesn't really know who he is. So the nice man who owns the coffee shop who takes him in, who conveniently has a daughter who's connected to this organization that is like kidnapping people in town and turning them into monsters, basically. There's this whole mystery about why this group, Faust, is doing that, what their true goal is, and as the show continues, you find out that everybody's all connected. The coffee shop owner, his daughter, Build himself, Kiryu Sento is his name that he's given by the coffee shop owner, who makes terrible coffee, by the way. And then there's a guy who's been framed for a murder, and he's on the run, and he ends up getting involved in Build's group with Sento, and they end up becoming best friends, basically. Sento is a brilliant scientist. He's a thinker, and he uses his mind for things, and his buddy, the convicted or the framed murderer, his name is Ryuga, Banjo Ryuga, and he actually is a martial artist. He's a boxer, I think. Basically, he's a fighter. So you've kind of got brains and brawn together, these two guys representing that. And the story gets a lot more complicated than that. I don't want to go into full spoilers, but basically it turns into Japan has been divided in three, and the nations are vying, like the sub-nations in Japan are vying for control, and the unit of power in this, they have these belts, and they have bottles that are full of energy that represent living things that are like kind and cuddly, and then like machines and devices that can be used for utility or destruction, chiefly destruction. And again, the reason for that is complicated, but I watched the ending of Kamen Rider Build today. In watching previous endings of Kamen Rider shows, I have cried. I think particularly in the last two, X8 and Ghost. And, you know, for some reason, Build didn't get me as emotionally today. I think that Build is probably the best constructed from Double to Build. It's the best constructed Kamen Rider show in the last, of the last 10 years. Or I guess it's 9 technically. But it wasn't my favorite. It was very competently put together. Apparently the man who wrote it is a drama writer. I listened to this Uncommon Cast RX that I'll put a link to their description. They've been, I guess they were on kind of a little hiatus, but pretty soon they should be talking about the end of the show, and they give really good information about who's been writing, who's been directing, all that stuff. I don't keep up on it as well as they do, but it's always interesting because you can go on their site and like look through and see pretty easily the connections between who's writing and directing on a show, what they've done in the past, and kind of what you can expect from them, and what they've done before. But anyway, this guy was a drama writer, and he had written various dramas, obviously, being a drama writer. I accidentally paused that, sorry. Anyway, so the guy who was writing this was a drama writer. He'd never been really super familiar with Kamen Rider, but apparently his son watched it, so he, I guess when he got the job, he started watching it with his son, and or something like that, and he really came to enjoy it. And it's interesting, Build has a lot of, I would say there's like a lot of pastiche. He brings in a lot of elements from other Kamen Rider shows, and almost like looks at the different Kamen Rider shows and what they've done, and goes in different directions, one to be novel, and two to like make a point. So it was a very, very well put together, very well structured show. For the most part, I would give it like a 90%, 90 out of 100% as far as how well it's structured. But I don't know and I really did like the characters, and they did really great things. And I'm really happy with the ending. And some Kamen Rider shows have had famously bad endings. Like I hear Kamen Rider Faiz, which has a brilliant design, and it's something I definitely want to watch. I hear Faiz just like ends. Like I don't even know if the hero wins. I heard that like the villains pack up their stuff and leave, and they're like, yeah, we're not going to do our villainous thing anymore, like see you later. And the writer's like, okay, fine, whatever. That's what I heard. Sorry for not giving a spoiler warning if you're going to check out Kamen Rider Faiz. But anyway, which by the way, it's 555 and it's pronounced Faiz like the Greek letter, although apparently they use the wrong Greek letter in the actual like imaging and marketing of the show. Go figure. Anyway, I really liked Build. I thought it was excellently made, and I'm kind of repeating myself. Just the themes that they were able to explore in it. They talked about war profiteering, which I talked about. Shotori Shinomori, who started Kamen Rider with the manga, he created Cyborg 009 also, and that had Black Ghost, the war profiteers. And so they talk about that, which is super interesting. Like they talk about like what it means to be like a people, and like what a country is, and how a country isn't made up of the people at the top, it's made up of every citizen that's a part of the country, and that the power of the government is, power that's ceded by the people to the government for the greater good. And they talk about concepts of the greater good. And there's even a guy who has a heroic arc where he goes from being a villain who's willing to sacrifice the common man and woman for the greater good, and then he comes out the other side of that wanting to be like a real public servant, or a real servant of the people, sacrificing himself in his great position of authority for the greater good. Authority, power, I would say both. And it's really impressive. So like there's all these great things in Build, and the way it ends And it kind of, so I already spoiled it and said that it was like a multiverse thing. It basically ends with the hero, actually the main two heroes, Sento and Ryuga, or Banjo, really, ending up in an alternate Earth universe from theirs. And it's a place where everybody can be happy and where things have been different from how they had been over the past 10 years in their reality, or on their Earth. So, I don't know, it's really interesting. It was a really interesting show, really good. A lot of the suits were fun. There were crazy powers in it where, like, basically every form of build was a combination of like an organic thing and an inorganic thing. So his main form is Rabbit Tank. So he's half red and half blue, and with black and some other accents on him. And he's got like the jumping power of a rabbit and the speed of a rabbit, sort of. And then like the power of a tank. And he's got tank treads on his foot that move and silly stuff like that. And I mean, but it's a lot of fun. And it's basically like a live action comic book, if you want to think of it that way. So it's very much like in the superhero genre of fiction, but it just has like a different ethic, and or a different ethos, I should say, and you wouldn't expect it to be made for American children, but for whatever reason, Japan's culture is okay with giving different things to their children. I mean, every culture is unique, so what they deem acceptable for their children is different from what Americans deem acceptable for their children. And honestly, there were some parts of watching Build, there was a war going on in the show, and between the different nations, the sub-nations in Japan, where I frankly found it hard to watch, especially because some of the things that were happening as the show was airing were like mirroring things going on with North Korea and South Korea, and like it was a very real world show, very heavy, very serious, but it still never lost the spirit of fun and like adventure, and it was deeply moving sometimes, and then comedic and lighthearted at others. And I'm just really impressed. Like I said, I think this is the best put together Kamen Rider to date. Although I've only seen half of Kamen Rider, I actually want to go back and watch the first half. I'm going to skip this year's Kamen Rider, which is it's called Zio, and he's going to be like dealing with all the riders throughout the 20-year history since it started back up in the year 2000. And I want to go back and watch Kuga, the first one, and go on from there. And that might be an offhand remarks ongoing thing that I do, talking about it every couple episodes, kind of like I do with G Gundam. So we'll see. Anyway, that's all I have to say for now. If you enjoyed this, go ahead and give me a like. You can share, you can subscribe, and you can ring that notification bell so you get your stuff as it comes out. Thanks, everybody, and until next time, be well.